Hello, Tennessee Voices listeners and viewers. This is David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Director for the USA Today Network Tennessee and the Tennessean. Today I have the pleasure of having as my guest Brad Leon, who is the Executive Director of BlueSky Tennessee Institute. Brad, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, David.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And for people who are not familiar, would you talk a little bit about what the BlueSky Institute is?
Sure. I think the best place to start is really to talk about why we created the program. So Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee was really facing two distinct challenges. The first is that we couldn't find nearly enough people that had a computer science background and IT background. So we employ more than 900 people in our IT team, but at any given point during the year, we'll have anywhere between 50 and 150 vacancies. And that is not just a Blue Cross Blue Shield problem. If you look across the state of Tennessee, last year, there were about 4,100 jobs that required some kind of a computer science or IT background. And collectively, Tennessee colleges and universities were only graduating about 1,100. So annually, there's just a systemic gap between supply and demand for people with an IT skill set. That was one challenge, and I promise you, if we looked at every state in the country, every nation in the world, you'd see similar statistics. We just don't have enough folks who are pursuing this. The second big challenge was that once we did hire a college graduate onto our IT team, we found that it took anywhere between 9 and 12 months to get them up to speed on the way that we did business. And so our CEO, JD Hickey, and our leadership team just thought there's got to be, a different and better way. And so that's where the concept of BlueSky started. And there were several components to the concept. So the first is that we have created with ETSU an accelerated bachelor's degree in computing. So what would usually take students 4 to 5 years is going to take 27 months for our BlueSky students. The second big component is really addressing that readiness to work right when they graduate. It's all work-based learning at our headquarters in Chattanooga. So students will be taking all of their courses at our Blue Cross headquarters. They will be working on real-life case studies. They will be working side by side with IT professionals. They'll be getting mentored by our senior leadership team and IT professionals on our team. And they will be taking on paid internships during their 27 months. So the hope with all of that is that once they're ready to be hired at the end of their 27 months, they'll be fully game ready instead of having to take another 9 to 12 months. The third big component of BlueSky is student supports. I mean, we obviously know how challenging an accelerated program will be, and we're also well aware of the statistics about college graduation in this country, and they're pretty grim. I mean, over a 6-year period, I think the national statistics are around 50% of students complete. And if we're not extending that out, we're actually truncating it. So we've built in really robust student supports to ensure that students have everything they need to be successful in this program. And then the final, and I think the most exciting component for me as a career educator, was that students not only earn a degree in 27 months, but a job at Blue Cross Blue Shield Tennessee. So that's the reason why the program started and what we're really trying to accomplish.
Hey, you've written a couple of guest opinion columns on the subject, and one of them the first one you wrote about explaining the project. I really like this line that you said. You said that the program was implemented out of corporate necessity, but it's also a path to helping our communities, our state, and our country grow stronger. And you also wrote about data that there's roughly 4-to-1 disparity in terms of jobs from employers that require an IT background compared to Tennessee college and university graduates with those degrees. You alluded to it in your earlier remarks, but there's a lot of issues with regard to workforce preparation in Tennessee. I've been just traveling around the state over the last couple of months, and that's a huge question that came up at every single forum. How do you prepare the people of Tennessee for the jobs of tomorrow?
The first thing that we had to do at Blue Cross was get very, very discreet in what exactly we needed. And so even before I even came on, our IT team, in partnership with a number of different folks from across the state, exhaustively and in detail put together a list of knowledge, skills, and mindsets that we really needed our graduates to be prepared for. And so when we went on a search for partners, we didn't just say, graduates are not prepared. We said, here's specifically what we need them to have before they graduate so that they can be ready and plugged in. And I think that that is a step, frankly, as someone who's worked in K-12 his entire career, a lot of employers will say that. They'll say, you're not preparing, workers for the jobs that I have, but steps that employers need to take is to exhaustively and in detail say, here is exactly what we need, so that whether it's K-12 or higher ed, our educational institutions can respond to that. And I think that that's something that I really credit Blue Cross's IT team with, because they had the foresight to say, we need to be explicit about what we're looking for, and we've done that. And ETSU has stepped up and said, here is where we can meet the needs that you have.
Oh, thank you very much. And you also wrote an op-ed with regard to an example of some students who are doing well. It was titled, Why We Believe 32 High School Students Represent the Future of Blue Cross. And you mentioned specifically a few of them who have made a tremendous difference, Eamon, Dennis, and Sandra. Could you tell me a little bit about your relationship with the students themselves?
Yeah, I really got an opportunity to get to know most of our students, all of our students during the recruitment and the application process. And what we were really looking for in all of our students, and the three that you specifically named, a few things. I mean, enthusiasm for the field. This is not a college program where you can change your major 3 or 4 times. This is what you're going to not only pursue for your degree, but also what you're going to do for a career. We needed professional maturity. We needed people who wanted to be leaders. And the reason for that is that Blue Sky is not just a pathway into an entry-level job on our IT team. From the design, we wanted to make sure that the students who were taking part in Blue Sky were the future leaders of our company. And in my interview with JD Hickey, when I was interviewing, he said, look, this is a leadership pipeline. We are a data science company. We do most of our work through IT, and the next CEO and future CEOs are really going to have this skill set. And so from the very beginning, we looked for that leadership potential in all of our students. And Dennis, Eamon, definitely have that, as do all of our students. And what we look forward, they're joining us on August 1st for the first time for their summer orientation. And I just look forward to deepening those relationships. But the recruitment and admissions process gave me a chance to get to know them pretty well.
In many cases, these are students who may not have necessarily thought they had the opportunity to advance something, and in some cases coming from immigrant backgrounds or lower income backgrounds. And this is really provided, as we've heard a lot of conversations about people a little bit despondent about the American dream. This provides that opportunity to thrive economically, because that's one thing too, as well, that as we talk about these income disparities, this provides an actual path to a good paying job.
Yeah, and that's something we also looked at with community partners to say, how can we have the maximum community impact? And there was some previous work that had been done between the school district, community partners, and the Gates Foundation to really help improve college persistence rates at 6 high schools in Chattanooga. And they were 6 high schools that had the lowest college persistence rates. And so we recruited everywhere in Hamilton County, but we specifically went as deep as we possibly could in those high schools. And very happy to report that half of our students, 16 of our 32, are coming from what used to be called Gates schools. And we look forward to every single one of them. We think they're going to be great, and they're going to have a great job to not only get a degree, but as you said, IT jobs, they're going to be starting anywhere between $55,000 and $65,000 a year, depending upon what they end up pursuing. But if you think about the long-term trajectory of an IT worker and the need that exists in the current economic landscape, these are folks who are going to have a real opportunity for wealth building capacity over the course of their lives, which will not only impact them, of course, but we're hoping the community, their families, generations to come. So that was very much what we were trying to accomplish on the front end of this.
Well, thank you. We've gotten to the midpoint of our conversation where I'd like to ask guests a little bit about what they've been doing themselves to cope during the time of pandemic. We're obviously in a far different state than when we started this show back in 2020, but I am always curious about the things that people have been doing to cope during the time in terms of what you're watching, reading, doing, just to stay healthy and well.
Oh, that's such a great question. I've really tried to double down on the things that I think are going to make me healthy. So for me, that includes trying to get as good a sleep as I can. I could walk you through the ridiculous lengths I go to get a good night of sleep, but I I work very hard to make sure that I'm sleeping well, making sure that I'm have strong relationships with my family. So I was running dad school during the early days of the pandemic. I'm a former teacher, and at my 6-year-old and my 10-year-old were finishing up the school year, and I was able to take part in making sure that they had clearing schedules. I was assessing them. I was doing all of that stuff. And I think that the toughest part for me was moving from Memphis to Chattanooga in the height of the pandemic and really not have the ability to build relationships in the community. And so it was just me and my family unit. So what we tried to do is make sure that we were as close as possible, family traditions, reading together, that kind of thing. But for me, it's sleep, it's exercise, it's making sure I have strong relationships. And once the vaccine came out, I actually contracted COVID before we had the vaccine. It was in March. The vaccines were about to come out, and then me and my family all got hit with COVID. Then we got vaccinated, and then I have since then started re-engaging with, I think, probably my most important hobby, which is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it's a physical activity, of course, but it's also because there's such a strong community of people, and they kind of become your second family. And so those are the things I've tried to do to stay healthy and keep a good mindset during all of this. Because I had to walk away from jiu-jitsu for like 8 months during that.
Oh, just for your health. How's your health doing now?
It's great. It's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about, coming back to the conversation, is that of the IT market, because I remember attending a forum a few years ago where, the traditional look of IT as being a siloed industry is now you're seeing major companies, from healthcare companies to automotive, elsewhere, have major IT departments because of how necessary they are. We certainly, at my parent company, Gannett, we have a very large IT segment as well. Because you have everything from cybersecurity and healthcare. I can imagine that patient privacy and other propriety issues are at risk. So tell me a little bit about the evolution of IT and how it relates to Blue Cross and BlueSky.
I think all of our IT teams, I can talk a little bit about BlueSky too. All of our IT teams play, a central role and are constantly working together. There are 3, big teams that we've designed BlueSky around. It's infrastructure and operations, it's cybersecurity, and it's development. And so when we are, putting together our internship component for BlueSky, the design of that is so that students are getting a real world look at each one of those big buckets. And then the 4th internship is really going to be a deep dive into the specialty of their choosing. But the reason why we wanted them to have exposure to all 3 of those areas, and those 3 areas I think anyone who knows IT knows that there's lots of variety even within those buckets, but we need them to have a well-rounded skill set. Even if they decide they want to specialize in cybersecurity, you need to have an understanding of infrastructure and operations. You need to have an understanding of development, even if you are in cybersecurity. And same is true for if you want to really focus on development. You need to understand infrastructure and operations. So what we're trying to do through the internship component is really make sure that students have a very strong base of understanding of all areas before they really specialize in their 4th and final internship.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think one of the things I remember studying when I was back in business school, maybe over a decade ago, was just the need for STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. I found myself as a journalist who was more, focused on the artistic side, but that numbers really mattered. Understanding numbers, understanding math, understanding that terminology. And I would be curious to see, in terms of the evolution. Back then, coding was huge. Today there's independent coders, and you don't necessarily need to be an expert in coding if you're not in the IT world. And so tell me a little bit about the jobs that are available, the spectrum of those jobs that you have available.
Yeah, I think I would sort of maybe repeat some of what I said, but I think the cybersecurity team, when we were interviewing BlueSky students, was the area that really stood out. And I think there was a real reason why students were initially attracted to cybersecurity, even if they didn't have a fundamental understanding of what that meant. And it's because the students that we were recruiting and that we were interviewing really want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And they see defense and making sure that members' data is secure, that members' health information is secure, that it's not being accessed by bad actors is something that they really want to, show that they want to do. And that's something that really stood out for me. So, but the jobs are diverse. I mean, and it could be that some of the students who are initially interested in cybersecurity would be much more interested once they get into understanding the field in something like development. And so that's what I'd say to that question.
Mm-hmm. And tell me a little about your own origin story. You talked about being a teacher before. What is your background? How did you get involved in this industry? How did you get to where you are today?
So I was going to be a lawyer, and I was in line for the LSAT, and I saw a poster from an organization called Teach for America, and I don't remember what the poster said. It was back in 1999, but the thrust of it was not everyone has the same opportunity. You can be part of the solution. And I had enough personal experience of the truth of that statement to want to join an organization like Teach for America. My parents were teenagers. Neither of my parents went to college. And some of my earliest memories as a kid was being coached by my parents on how to talk to bill collectors when they would call our home. And I was a very little kid, but I was a firsthand witness, I think, to my parents' struggle, their shame, and their reinforcement to me that if I wanted a different kind of life, the only path was through education. And so when I saw that poster for Teach for America, there was something about my own personal experience that resonated, and I became an 8th grade language arts and social studies teacher in New Orleans, and got to see firsthand that, whatever challenges that I faced as a kid were paled in comparison to what my students were facing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, all of my students were living very, very low, very below the poverty level. And I decided that I wanted to continue to make an impact within education, specifically in low-income communities. So I went to work for the national organization Teach for America. I launched Teach for America in Memphis and Teach for America in Nashville, and then took a national role with the organization where I got to work with several different states, Texas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And I just kept wanting to make bigger and bigger impacts. So before taking the BlueSky role, I was at Shelby County Schools in Memphis for 7 years. I was there during the year of the merger and the demerger. I was the chief of innovation initially, and then became the chief of strategy and performance management, and got to work with a number of great colleagues, specifically Dorsey Hobson, who was the superintendent at the time. But what really appealed to me about BlueSky was that I just continued to see that there was an ongoing dialogue in education about whether all kids should or should not go to college. And if it is a binary, then I'm on the side of kids going to college, because there's no mistaking the correlative data that shows lifetime earnings is much stronger with a college degree. But what I was seeing was that a lot of students that I worked with would take a long time to graduate. They may or may not be majoring in something that could get them a career. They would struggle to find jobs, and then they'd graduate with $50,000 to $100,000 in debt, and would spend the first 15 years of their career paying back debt instead of building wealth. And I just thought there has got to be a better way to do this. And the concept of BlueSky, where we were still working with students in a university to get a degree, but that it plugged immediately into not just a job, but a career path that had huge upside. I thought if we can be successful here, there's no stopping other universities and industry from partnering together on things that are vital for them. So I thought immediately of the University of Memphis and FedEx, because I was there at the time. But I think really if we can be a positive proof point, the sky is the limit for this kind of model in the future.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing that, and also for appearing on today's episode of the Tennessee Voices video podcast. Again, this is Brad Leon, Executive Director of BlueSky Tennessee Institute. Before I let you go, I would like to ask guests if they would leave some words of wisdom to our audience who may be struggling during this time.
Yeah, I think this is advice I give myself on a daily basis too. You can do anything one step at a time. You can do it one day at a time, one moment at a time. And if you're able to break things down in that kind of way, anything is manageable. Life can be a lot harder when you look at it in totality. It can be a lot more manageable when you're taking it chunk by chunk and bit by bit. So that's advice that I give to myself, and I'd encourage your listeners to take that advice as well.
Well, thank you very much. May you stay well and healthy. And again, I'm so grateful for you appearing on the show today.
Thank you, David. It was great to be with you.